Hey, welcome everybody. This is Tom Bentey with the Tom Bentey Media Podcast. I'm here with my friend and fellow filmmaker, Mr. Rob Ciano. Rob has a film out there on Amazon Prime and other platforms called Shimmer, which just was released in September 2021. Rob is the writer, director of that film. I was lucky enough to have a bit part as a SAG-Aftra actor in that film, and I'm looking forward to checking it out this Friday night in Cranford, New Jersey. And what's the date? 17th of September?
It's the 17th, yeah, but that's not a public screening. That's just a private screening.
That's just my private, yeah, it's just a private screening.
Yeah, private screening.
I'm going to check it out in Cranford this coming Friday night. And
yes.
Everyone else can check it out on Amazon Prime. And what other platforms is it on, Rob?
So it's on Amazon Prime. It is on Vudu. It is on the Dish Network. You can get it on In Demand. And also you can pick up a physical copy on Blu-ray or DVD at Walmart.
Very cool. Awesome. Congrats once again on the film. So Rob, why don't you tell us a little bit about Shimmer? What's it all about?
So Shimmer, our tagline is, "Are you afraid of the light?" There is an entity that lives in the light and you really can't see it during the day. Our main character is a forensic scientist investigating a series of strange deaths. And as she continues to investigate, she starts to realize this really doesn't seem like a human killer. And then she starts to realize, oh my gosh, this thing is coming after me and has to stop it. And that's really that's the basic premise of the movie. Let's see, we started working on this back in early 2019, very beginning of 2019. Myself and my co-producer Freya got together and we started kind of coming up with some ideas of stories and what kind of what kind of movie we wanted to tell. And this idea of being afraid of the light kind of came up, and the story developed out of that. Why would someone be afraid of the light? What is the light? What does it represent? And then the story kind of developed, and it became this concept of this light that's stalking people and different things. So it was a lot of fun to develop that concept and see where that story came from.
Now, would you describe this film as a horror film, a thriller film? How would you describe it? What genre?
I personally would put it in a mystery thriller genre. I think it's also fair to say there are some horror elements to it. I think it's fair to say that there are some sci-fi elements to it, but personally, I would say it's a mystery thriller. I think the official thing that this distributor said was a sci-fi thriller. So that's the
cool. Now, growing up, were you a big fan of sci-fi thrillers? Were you a big fan of horror films? Would you say there's an influence for this particular movie that comes to mind, or is it something completely independent of that?
Well, I definitely enjoyed sci-fi quite a bit. I watched a lot of sci-fi growing up. I watched a lot of Star Wars, Star Trek, Lost in Space, all that kind of fun stuff. One thing that really interested me, because I actually wasn't a huge fan of most horror. I did like things like The Shining, but anything that wasn't, I wasn't really into gory films like Saw or Blair Witch, stuff like that. Like I saw these couple of these films. But what really interested me, and this film actually did sort of start out as a horror, because what interested me is being scared of something, not because it's a jump scare or because it's gory or because of blood or whatever. It's scary because you understand what makes it scary. You understand why this thing is dangerous. So you don't need a jump scare. You just need to show the thing being there and you understand the threat. So that was something that was, I wanted to, if I was going to try and scare people, I wanted to do it in a way that I really hadn't seen before, or at least hadn't seen quite as often more recently. So yeah, I mean, there was an element of influence from horror films, but really I think it was more of this kind of challenging the idea of what makes something scary. And that's a reversal too, because you think, are you afraid of the dark? It makes sense to be afraid of the dark, but why are you afraid of the light? You can see what's there. You can see why that thing is scary. So that was just a kind of a challenge almost to figure out how to make that work.
Awesome. Now let's go back to the writing aspect of it. I always say that writing it can be the most fulfilling, but it can be also the most difficult aspect of any production. Now, you said you had a producing partner. How did the process of writing this script take place? Did you kind of just do it in a short period of time? Did you set time periodically, day by day? Like, how does the process for writing break down for you?
For me, in this instance, What I tend to do is I will come up with an outline, and then I will try and just get some different reactions for that outline from a few trusted writer people that I know. In this case, I think I know that the outline for Shimmer ended up being very different than the outline of the film proper, because, it's just that process of refining the story, figuring out what works best. You show it to somebody you trust, who can provide some, good feedback, and they say, okay, cool, this element works. This doesn't make any sense to me. And then, rework it a little bit. So I did, for this process, as I said, I had a producing partner, and we were kind of going back and forth on like different elements that we were interested in exploring, but really it was up to me to create the storyline, how these different elements connected and why. And once I had an outline that I had kind of shopped around to a few different people, and really this was not too many people, this was 2 or 3 people that I, was really, trust their opinion on writing and, know them very well, and they know me well. And I came up with an outline, or not an outline, I came up with a first draft of script, same thing, brought it to some people. And it was just this process of refinement, making sure that the themes that I was trying to express were expressed clearly. And even that first draft of the script, I think that I actually literally rewrote top to bottom the script 2 times. So there was an original one, and then there was a unique second draft, and then a unique third draft, which then was just kind of polished up, and that's what we ended up shooting with. But the process for me kind of was, once I had an idea of how I wanted to, especially once I had the outline was a big help, because that way when I would sit down during the day, and I tried to do this every day, I think my process was I would go for a walk, I would have a coffee, and then I would sit down and I would start writing. And so when I had the outline there, it was really easy for me to say, okay, here's this element that I want to tackle. Does this paragraph in the outline take place over the course of 1 scene or 4 scenes? And then I would just sort of like, very, very much like almost freehand write out what I thought that scene should be. And I really wrote that first draft almost in that freehand sense, where I would write it out freehand and then go back and reread it and say, okay, am I saying what I want to say? And then just go through the whole story that way. And I wasn't able to write every day, but I did try to be really consistent as much as I could. And after that, it's just a process of refining. And as I said, I did completely rewrite the whole thing 2 times before, we had a draft that we were ready to shoot with.
It's all about writing is rewriting. It's rewriting. It's rewriting. But yeah, that's how I do it as well. You have the outline. Once the outline is complete, you get feedback from friends, see what works, what doesn't. And then once that's solved, then you begin the process of actually writing the script. But that can change. I mean, there's really no set way, but it's important to have a really solid script before you begin production. And I want to talk about production. So, okay, you have the final script, you're ready to potentially shoot it. What's the process like from there? I mean, how do you get financing, and then the whole production process, locations, casting? And I think you have an interesting story with how Nicole, the main character, came on board, which would be cool to share. But, how does it all break down? So once you have the idea, then you have the script, and then how do you get that made?
Sure. Well, basically, once we had the idea, as I said, like I had sort of agreed to work with somebody as a producing partner. So the 2 of us were looking for a story to tell. Once we had a story to tell, it was really good because we had a good partnership. We actually were on the phone almost every day for about 6 months as we were coordinating. There was a lot of setup in saying, okay, we want to tell this story. Even before we had the final script, we were like, here is the amount of money that we realistically think that we can achieve to make this movie. And so we wrote the script with these things in mind, with these limitations in mind, so that we would be sure, hey, if we ended up with $1 million budget, great, we can do more. But we ended up shooting for under $1 million. We had limitations that we had to stay between. So, we wrote the script with that in mind. Actually getting the funding for the film. So it was kind of a unique experience on my part, because I had been making movies my whole life. So pretty much if you knew me from at any point in my life, you knew that I was interested in making movies. And especially in my 20s, when I was really focusing on, finishing up some projects, I ended up shooting a 13-minute short film, which was picked up by Showtime. And And so that kind of gave an investor that I know the confidence to say, hey, you want to make a low budget film here, so basically getting the funding in my experience was about displaying that I had the knowledge and the ability, and then finding the right person to show that to and say, hey, here's what I can do. And here's what I did with this budget. Here's my plan for moving forward. And that's also really important when you're getting funding, is you want to be able to say what your plan is. You want to be able to tell your investor why they should be confident in you. Because film is a risky investment. It's always a risky investment. So, any investment is a risky investment, but it's about, showing this person or people that you respect their investment and you respect them, and you want to just create the best product possible so that this story can be told. And it's also a big help if that investor or investors are invested in the story that you want to tell. One idea is, let's say, for example, if you have a film and your film is about the topic of, let's say, multiple sclerosis, you can go to different organizations and say, hey, I have a film. It's about this character. And they have this affliction, and I understand, and you can get information that can make your film better. And then you can get the investment from the people who, may want to, say like, hey, this is something that of course, that's a very sensational, example. I mean, you could do the same thing with, you want to make a movie about airplanes, right? And then you go to a local airport and say, hey, we're making this movie about an airplane. We'll put your airport in the movie if you give us, a couple $1,000 or something to that effect. And that's another method, but it's nobody's going to give you money for no reason. And it's about showing that you respect the person, you respect what the product you want to create is, and you just have that, you display that you have that knowledge and ability and intelligence to make that happen for them.
Yeah, totally. I mean, as a professor, a lot of students always ask me, hey, how do you get money to make your films? And there's really not one way to go about it. You basically have to know someone with money that believes in you and that's willing to provide you those funds to create something that they believe in as well. But there's just no one way to go about it. You kind of have to hustle, and you have to, like you said, you have to prove yourself first on a smaller thing generally to get the funds to create something bigger and more expansive. And you did that really well with the first film, which is it currently on, is it still on Showtime?
It should still be on Showtime. It is called Blackout. And then that's also available on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, and I remember how you got that deal is you were at the Garden State Film Festival. We both actually went to a distribution event, and
Yes.
a gentleman from Showtime was there, and you reached out to him, and a few months later he contacted you back, and next thing you know, you have this short film which is on Showtime, and that's great clout for any filmmaker, and for someone that's looking to get funds for future films. That's a really great thing to have on your resume and in your repertoire. So that it all worked out.
Yeah. And it's amazing. The power of networking is incredible. And even even if you don't have a huge resume of things that you've created, if it's always good to just make that connection and say, hey, I want to, I'm interested in making movies. I'm interested in shooting movies. I'm interested in writing movies, or whatever it is, because that person can know you, recognize your name later, think of you later for anything. Just having that confidence to say, hey, I'm a filmmaker, and introducing yourself as such and making connections as a filmmaker are going to be beneficial.
For sure. So you were able to secure funding. Then what's the process like? What's the steps after that?
Once we had the funding, and even before we had the funding, it was a huge organizational challenge on the producing side to figure out when you're going to shoot, how you're going to shoot, what you're going to shoot on, who's going to be in the film, who's going to be behind the camera, who's going to be doing makeup. And it's just about, it's a lot of patience and coordination. And it's important to have a good team member, especially if you're doing something that's a little more involved. If you're doing a one-day, short film, depending on how complex it can be, it's possible for one person to organize that whole thing themselves. we were shooting, you know, a multi-day, multi-week feature film, that's, at least for me, that was a little more than I could do myself. So I think that getting somebody to help figure out how to organize all these things, bringing on a line producer to figure out how the money is going to be spent in different ways. But really that's what it is on the ground level, is just a huge organizational map that you need to say, you know, you need to figure out when your shoot days are going to be. And it's tough. It's tough. And it's good to have somebody who's very organized. It's good if you're a really organized person yourself. I wouldn't say that we did things in this case in the most correct order, because it was a little sporadic. We got an actor here, we got a location here, we got a crew member here, part of that, I think, is because this is the first time we're making a movie with this production company. We're a new company. And so, you know, a lot of these relationships we were establishing for the first time. Moving forward, you know, I think it'd be easier to just say, oh, great, we know this director of photography. We want to work with this person. They're great. Or, you know, whatever. In this case, we had to find certain people and they trickled in at different times. But yeah, like I said, it's just a big organizational thing, and everything kind of happened all at the same time. You mentioned how we found our lead actress Nicole. It was, again, that's the power of networking. It was a completely random thing. I had been looking for an accountant to work on the film and mentioned what was going on. And this accountant said, oh, you should talk to my friend. My friend is an actress. She's done these projects. And so I said, sure, great. And I wasn't really, you know, somebody who says I'm a filmmaker, all the time I get people saying like, oh, you know, I'm an actor, or I know an actor, I know this person. In this case, turned out to be a real contact. This, you know, Nicole is an incredible talent, and she really brought a lot to the film. And it was just a completely random conversation, networking conversation that, you know, just an accountant saying, hey, I have an actor friend. Which was amazing. And, you know, she and I connected, and obviously she, you know, as you'll see, if you watch the film, does an incredible job. But it's the power of networking. The power of networking got us this lead actor. We did work with a casting director for some other actors. And then still others, we placed ads on places like Actors Access and Backstage.com. There was an audition process to an extent. Some people we were able to cast directly from tapes. Some people we had to bring in and had them read lines, or we had them do different, different callback readings or adjustments and things like that. But as I said, like, it did kind of happen over this whole period. We had kind of gathered the crew and said, we're going to do this. And it was a lot. It was a lot, but I think it always is. I've done a few, you know, films now, and it's always a lot leading up to production, because there are so many people who you need to take account of, and their needs, their timing, and I'm just getting lost in my conversation at this point. But
no, yeah, there's just so many different parts that need to come into place. And during the pre-production, ideally, you're trying to tie up as many of those loose ends as possible to ensure that the production runs smoothly. And I was on set for just one day. I was lucky enough to have a part in the film. And, you know, when I was on set, I mean, it seemed like everything was running really well. Now, did you run into any circumstances where any difficulties happened, or any things that you weren't expecting? I mean, obviously, for anyone that's been on an independent film set, you know it's going to be long hours. You know it's going to be, you know, it's a haul. I mean, any film set, but particular independent film set, it's not easy. I mean, it's long hours, it's tough. But anything that surprised you by being on set?
Well, one thing I want to say is, actually, to that point, part of the reason that the organizational challenge in pre-production is so great is so that when you get to set, everything goes as smoothly as it possibly can go. Now, things go wrong every day in a minor sense. You know, you're looking for something, this resource you need is out, this shot isn't working right. you can't find, element A, whatever it is. But for the most part, the pre-production process helped us go smoothly. Some of the things that would happen would be unexpectedly, maybe one of our crew members was unable to make it, and then we need to scramble and find something to do. But really what the biggest thing for us was, one of the things that we did not do quite as much in pre-production was storyboarding. There were not as many storyboards as we would have liked. So one of the things that came up on the day, and one of the things that we had a lot of challenges around, was figuring out how we're going to set up these shots in these spaces that maybe we didn't even necessarily get a chance to look at in too much detail before the filming day. There were one or two places, that we only had access to for, when we were shooting. So difficult to plan ahead for that. And so that comes with its own kind of challenge. But we were prepared as much as we could be. One of the biggest challenges that we had during production was, since this was the first production that we were doing with this company, there were things that we weren't aware that we needed to prepare for. That was a big challenge, which, for example, I really would have liked to have brought our production designer on earlier in the pre-production process. This person really, had a lot to give and a lot of talent. And, I think the film looks amazing. I wish I would have known some more of the resources that this person had available, because, maybe we could have done a few things differently. But, I think those were some of the challenges that we had, was just something unexpected comes up. You plan as much as you can. You try and spend the pre-production time, and I mean, you're even organizing down to, the minute, and you're saying for this hour and 15 minutes, we're going to be doing this. And then for this 30 minutes, we're going to move all of our stuff. And then for this amount of time, we're going to be doing this. And so you're planning these things months and months and months in advance. When you get there the day of, sometimes it doesn't work exactly that way. You want to be outside and it's raining. So like those kind of challenges definitely came up, or, we think it's going to take a certain amount of time to shoot one sequence, and then it ends up being wildly inaccurate, and we have to push something off until the end of the shoot. That happened a few times.
And that's all part of the process. I mean, that's
exactly
typical. There's some things you just can't account for, especially on independent films. Like you said, if you're scheduled to shoot outside and it rains, you have to juggle some things around. But overall, it seemed like it went well. I mean, from what I could tell from just being on set, it seemed like you run a really productive, efficient set. And I want to talk a little bit about your directing style. So we talked about the kind of logistical and all the logistical aspects that go into filmmaking, in terms of organizing that script, the schedule, casting. But what's your creative approach? I mean, I know for me, I really try to have a set that's, I'm more hands-off than hands-on, unless you have to be. Like, I don't want to interfere with the actors. And if you do a good job and you hire good actors that know what they're doing and that you believe in and that they believe in you, you can have that relationship with them where you can kind of just let them do their thing and just kind of oversee the whole process. What's your process like, and what's your creative vision in general and for this film, Shimmer?
I have a very similar view as far as directing actors, and then also working with crew members. The way that I see it is, if I'm hiring an actor to be a character, it's because they know how to act. They know the process of bringing this character to life. So my job as the director is not to say, you need to act in this way. My job as the director is to make sure that their performance is in line with the overall scene, the overall movie. The actors are creating one puzzle piece of the film. So I need to make sure that puzzle piece they're creating is going to fit into anything else, is going to fit into the rest of the movie. And that's kind of how I look at it. The time that I'll come in as a director, obviously you rehearse with your actors and you say, hey, this scene is about X, or maybe it's even better to go to your actors and say, what do you think this scene is about? And kind of ask them how they want to bring their characters to life. And, if I'm able to rehearse with my actors, I love to actually just let them go with the scene and see what their first instincts are. And then just kind of go in and say, all right, this is interesting. Maybe if we bring this element out a little more here, maybe we bring this element out a little more here. But as you said, it actually, for me, is kind of hands off because the actor is trained. I as the director, am not acting for them. I'm almost never going to go and say almost never going to give a line reading to an actor and say, no, don't say it like that. Say it like this, because to me, that's taking the acting away from the actor. So, and a similar thing with the interacting with the crew members and the crew. The gaffer knows how to do the gaffer's job. The director of photography knows how to do the director of photography's job. My job as the director is to steer the ship, make sure that all these puzzle pieces, and that's really what I think the director is the director. Every individual crew member or cast member knows what their puzzle piece looks like or what they think their puzzle piece should look like. So my job is just to make sure that all those pieces indeed do fit together, make the little adjustments where necessary. But in general, the director of photography, we've come to set, we've had a discussion, we know what the approach to the scene is going to be. So then I can say, okay, director of photography, we have a plan, you execute your part of that plan. Okay, actor, we have a plan, you execute your part of that plan. And then at that point, I'm just making sure that those plans are jiving properly. And if we need to make an adjustment, we make an adjustment. One other element is just thinking about, the director is in charge of the final product. So if there are other elements that aren't there on set, making sure those work as well. We have, you're shooting a telephone call between two actors and one of them is not there that day. You need to think about that, different things. But yeah, as I said, it's really just making sure that the ship is going in the right direction. You're steering the ship. The crew members know how to make it happen. The actors know how to make it happen. And as the director, I'm there to just keep everything together and make sure it all jives and keep that final product in mind and make sure all decisions always lead to that final product.
Very cool. Yeah, I totally agree. And, I like working with you as a director, and that's we kind of have similar approaches, it seems like. So
definitely. Yeah.
You finished the film in late 19, right? It was like November 19 you finished?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, obviously a few months later, COVID all happens. But what's the process of editing like? Did you run into challenges with editing? I know there are some motion graphics. There are some elements of graphics in this film. What was that process like? Did you run into challenges? How was that all about?
We were able to get a cut of the film before COVID really had hit. I traveled out to Los Angeles because our editor was based in Los Angeles, and he had been basically editing the film in 20-minute chunks and would send me like a 20-minute, here's the first 20 minutes, second 20 minutes. And, I would give kind of refinements and adjustments on those different clips. And then he put them all together, sent a rough cut. I flew out to Los Angeles in January of 2020. And we worked together and, refined that in person a little bit. I came back, he did some more final polishing. And at that point, COVID was starting to become a thing. Lucky for our production, we didn't have to interact with any more actors at that point. We had gotten all of the elements that we needed from the actors. So the pandemic really was not like an inconvenience in terms of us getting the elements we needed. It was just an inconvenience in terms of getting the rest of it done. COVID slowed everybody down. So there was just a difficult time communicating about some of the visual effects. We had an outside visual effects person. Excuse me. We had a difficult time communicating with some of the visual effects. We had an outside visual effects person. I did some visual effects myself as well. But really, I guess the biggest challenge was due to COVID because it's easier to give direction with editing if you're able to be there physically with the person and say, hey, this is an idea, as opposed to just writing down, here's the time code where I want something changed. That was a big advantage when I was able to physically be there with the editor in January of 2020. because we were able to say, oh, stop right here, let's do this thing and change it. And that way I don't have to wait, you know. There was a lot of waiting for adjustments during COVID, and that really stretched out our post-production process because, you know, we had to go do a lot of back and forth and sending files and downloading files and doing different things that, you know, we wouldn't necessarily have had to do if we were in person. That stretched out our post-production process quite a bit. But, you know, once we did have that cut of the film and we were ready, you know, we didn't have all of our visual effects in, but we had a film that was able to be watched. It told a complete story from beginning to end. And at that point we said, now it's time, you know, we want to start reaching out to some distributors or sales agents. And we happened to come in contact with a sales agent who really enjoyed the film and said they wanted to represent us. So at that point, we just needed to provide them with a completed film. They were planning to bring us to, you know, various virtual festivals because this is well into COVID at this point. And as I said, you know, the time ended up stacking against us. So we didn't actually get a final version of the movie until, you know, the beginning of 2021. And I think it was maybe February of 2021. So about 2 years from when we actually first started working on the script to a completed film. And,
that's actually really good. I mean, all things considered, I mean, it could take 10 years sometimes. So
that's true. Yeah.
2 years is actually really good.
Yeah, it did work out. I mean, and as I said, I think the biggest reason that happened is because if COVID is going to hit, it hit during post-production. So, you know, we didn't have to worry about COVID protocols to continue working or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, it was a good timeline.
So you reach out to the sales agent, they liked the film. They said, we want to represent this. Potentially you were going to go to film festivals, but that didn't work out because you didn't have the final cut, I guess, ready. And then you found a distributor ultimately before you even had to go to film festivals, correct?
Yeah, that's basically what happened. Now the sales agent took us to actually to a few film markets. So not exactly a festival where, you know, the general public can buy a ticket and watch the film, but, you know, where film buyers are looking to get the film from and, or are looking for content for whatever platform they happen to have. And that's basically what ended up happening was the sales agent found for us a distributor, and this is a North American distributor. And then there'll be different distributors for different territories elsewhere. But yeah, we have North American distribution right now.
And here we are, September 2021, and it's on Prime and Vudu.
Here we are.
These platforms. So that's great, man. It's really a huge accomplishment. All the best with that. So
thank you.
I guess, you know, to finalize here, tell the audience a little bit about you. I know you grew up in, you know, you're the pride and joy of Hillsborough, New Jersey. And you're living now in Asbury Park. And I'd love for you, Asbury is such a hot scene. Can you tell us a little bit about Asbury and also just kind of how you got here? Like growing up, I guess you loved movies, and I know you went to Montclair State, and just a little bit about you to leave our audience with in terms of your kind of career path and life path.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess I started, I guess the story that I tell about myself is that I started acting on stage when I was 8 years old, and I did a lot of community theater musicals growing up. I acted on stage in these musicals from when I was 8 years old until all the way up through college. I continued doing some shows, and I would do maybe 2 or 3, you know, musicals a year. You know, they would run for 2 or 3 weekends, community theater, not paid stuff, just for fun, and you know, putting on some great shows like The King and I and The Music Man and Connecticut Yankee, and just a whole ton of really great shows. You know, I just learned about the interaction between the artist and the audience. You know, from a very young age, I was on stage and just like, you know, learning what comedic timing looks like as a kid. And, you know, my character tells a joke that's scripted, but then I hear how the audience reacts to it, you know, depending on how I say it and when I say it. So I kind of had this like training going on from a very young age about like what acting is and how audiences receive different acting things. And also when I was younger, a friend of mine ended up getting a video camera for a holiday or his birthday. I don't know what it was, but then we started making little movies, and these were ridiculous movies. First of all, this was the kind of camera, it was a kid's toy camera, so it didn't have a tape deck in and of itself. If you wanted to record video, you had to plug it into a VCR and put a regular VHS tape in there. So we would make these movies on this thing, and then one that I remember was one of the first ones we did was it was called Earthquake, and it was just us as kids shaking the camera around for an hour. And then there was one shot in that movie that I remember, and it sticks with me, where we happened to turn the camera sideways, and my brother, who must have been 3 or 4 years old, was having fun and running around with us. And he happened to be laying on the coffee table in such a way that when I had tilted the camera, it looked like he was hanging off of a cliff. And it was so perfect. I could not believe, if you just freeze framed that and ignored the fact that there were pillows behind him, it would have been amazing. And so I just wanted to keep doing stuff like that. And I bothered my parents to get me a video camera, and they got me a video camera. And then when I was in high school, and this probably was just extremely fortunate, my high school had a video and film elective class. So there was video and film, which was half of a year, and then there was advanced video and film, which was a full year, and video and film was a prerequisite to advanced video and film. So my freshman year of high school, I took video and film, and then sophomore and junior and senior year, I took advanced video and film as that elective, all 4 years of high school. Well, the final 3 years of high school. And that was huge, because I was able to edit on Final Cut Pro. I was able to edit on iMovie. We had various cameras we could use. I mean, and all of my teachers knew me as the kid who made movies and acted. So wherever possible, if I could turn a paper into a movie instead, my teachers would sometimes allow me to do that. So I remember I made a movie for math class called The Math Tricks, which was terrible, but it was a spoof on The Matrix, where we had to use mathematical equations to figure out what was going. I don't know. It was really bad, but that was what I was able. That was who I was as a kid, and at the same time still doing the acting. And when it came time, as I'm nearing the end of high school, to think about if I want to go to school, if I want to study, what I want to do, it was obviously, do I want to go for acting, or do I want to go for film? Ultimately, I decided I wanted to go for film, because I figured, I might have a little bit easier, it might be easier for me to get to a career in that sense. But also my interests were so much bigger than just being a performer. I wanted to write. I wanted to tell stories. I always wrote stories growing up. I always did, obviously I was making movies growing up and doing all these things. So I just, that seemed like a bigger and more interesting world to me. So I went in that direction. And I guess I just kept doing the same thing I had always been doing. I ended up getting way in over my head. I made a Harry Potter fan film series that took me 7 years to complete the editing on, because I had all of these visual effects in there that I was doing just completely by myself. But that's just living and learning the process. And I'm glad that I did it. And I'm glad that I, actually finished the project, because, that was one of the things that enabled me to impress somebody to give me money to make the short film. It all stacked on top of itself. All the, experience stacks on top of itself. But I guess that's really.
Sorry about that, Rob.
That's all right.
Yeah. So you started at a young age, and now I know that Harry Potter documentary, it's on Amazon, correct? Amazon Prime.
Yes. Yeah. The Harry Potter documentary is a separate one. The Harry Potter document. So the fan film series is narrative. There's 3 5-minute shorts and then an hour long feature thing. And then I made a separate documentary about Harry Potter fans. Harry Potter and the Harry Potter series was a big influence on me growing up, both the books and the movies, because, I really enjoyed the fantasy worlds, and was really involved in that kind of Harry Potter community growing up, and I wanted to highlight what that did. There were so many people who grew up watching the Harry Potter series who were then inspired to become writers or become musicians or to do these different things as a direct result. So I wanted to tell that story in that documentary.
That's great. That's great. So you started at a young age, and I think that's a big part of being successful in anything. It's just sticking with it, not giving up. Mm-hmm. And as a child, you had that appreciation for the connection between the audience and the artist, and it just continued from community theater all the way to feature filmmaking, and that's really great. And I just really appreciate your persistence. And I know a lot of people, they get involved, and it's one setback, and they move on to something else. And you can't have that mindset if you want to be successful in filmmaking and acting, or in anything really. If you want to be a successful attorney, successful doctor, you have mm-hmm. to stick with it. You can't just give up at the slightest challenge or slightest adversity. And with your Harry Potter thing, it took you 7 years, but you got it done. That's great.
Yeah, it took 7 years. I got it done. And then I could use elements of that to further what my goals were, and it's, as you said, it's persistence. It's saying, this is what I want to do with my life. And then making sure that all of your decisions point you in that same direction, and just not giving up. Everything is going to be difficult. I mean, especially pursuing your goals is going to be difficult because, it oftentimes seems like the universe or the world or whatever you want to call it is going to stack itself against the goals you want to achieve. You have a direction, and it seems like things pop up, but you just have to say, no, like, this is the way I'm going. I'm going to break through this boulder, or I'm going to clear this road, and we're going to make it happen. It's easier said than done, but it's worth it. It's worth it in the end.
For sure. If you're talking about fulfillment in life and both your professional and personal lives, I think you have to put in the work, and you have to do things that you're really passionate about.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little about, you're living in Asbury. How's Asbury been is post-COVID or during COVID now? I mean, how's everything going there?
Asbury Park is awesome, as always. We had a full summer of music. They had the Stone Pony Summer Stage was open once again. And we had great musicians come in, Kesha, Flogging Molly, Violent Femmes, bunch of really good bands come through. The beach was open. Everybody was having a good time surfing. They're actually setting up right now for the See Here Now Festival, which is 2 days of music this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Great lineup of bands, 3 stages of music. It's going to be a whole big thing. I actually just am in the process of editing my second feature film, which takes place in the town of Asbury Park. It's a movie called 29.
Which I was sound recordist on, I might add.
Sound recordist, Tom Bentey. Sound recordist extraordinaire, I might add. And that one's, it's a simple love story. It's about 2 kind of naive 20-somethings. They've been skating their way through life, and they meet and start to fall in love at the same time as life threatens to take them in separate directions. So they need to figure out a way to take the reins of life and be together. And that's a nice little love story that takes place here in the beautiful town of Asbury Park.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to checking that out as well. Anything on the horizon? So 29 hopefully is going to come out when?
I'm hoping 29. I'm very close to a cut of 29 that I'm ready to start shopping around, I should say. I already have like a rough cut, and so at this point I'm just making sure that the elements are all in place and that the story is told, effectively, and then we get a nice polish on the film and everything like that. I think that we should be able to watch 29 in 2022, if not sooner, but I would say 2022 is probably realistic. We're already in September at this point. And beyond that, I have a few other outlines that I have written. I've got a couple, I've got a regular good old comedy movie. I've got an action comedy. There's another sci-fi horror flick that I may or may not be involved in. And I've got many, many stories that I'm looking forward to telling in the next few years. My goal is to make one movie a year. of my own. I think I'm 2 for 2 as long as I get 29 out in the next year. And yeah, that's the goal.
Cool, man. Well, all the best. Once again, you can check out Shimmer. It is on Amazon Prime and Vudu, and you can pick up a hard copy DVD, which I guess some people are still into at Walmart and other retailers. But it's a great film. I highly recommend it. And once again, filmmaker extraordinaire, Mr. Rob Ciano, thank you so much for being on the Tom Bentey Media Podcast.
Tom, it was great. I'm so glad we got to do this, and thank you for having me.